Okay, time to preview the Roscommon football final on this weekend between Padraig Pearses and Roscommon Gaels. I'm with Martin Wynne. How are you doing, Martin?
I'm good, Shane.
Yeah, so he's a freelance journalist based in Roscommon and regular contributor to the Roscommon Herald. A Boyle man, of course. So you're your parish lose to 12-man Padraig Pearses in the semi-final.
Sadly, yes.
Had to hurt.
It did hurt. It certainly hurt from Boyle point of view, yeah. I suppose Pearses were definitely the better team on the day.
There was a bit of confusion over some of the black cards and the yellow cards, and like there was a big schmozzle in the first half where a load of people got yellow cards.
There wasn't an actual schmozzle, as you put it.
Well, like a schmozzle could be anything now. It's just, but there was a lot of yellow cards shown.
I think Pearses picked up 7 or 8 yellow cards, but they were actually different incidents.
Okay.
Like, I suppose Pearses, they would have targeted. Generally, the feeling about Boyle would be they've a solid enough team, but Enda Smith, Donny Smith, Keane McKeown would be the real key men. So it's kind of generally you'd be. The thoughts would be that if you can stop Enda Smith, Donny Smith, you'll probably stop Boyle. So I think Pearses kind of would have targeted the Boyle key men.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of how they started racking up the cards. It was what you might call strategic fouling. So it ended up with apart from the 7 yellow cards, David Murray got sent off. Got picked up a second yellow card in injury time, so they were down to 14 men just before half time. Connor Daly sent off sometime during the second half. No, Lorcan Daly sent off. That was the controversial one you're probably talking about.
Yeah.
So he was sent off for. It was a black card, but he was initially replaced, but then the linesman pointed out that he may have got a yellow card in the first half as well.
So the sub had to go off.
So the sub had to return to the bench. So it kind of the referee kind of maybe perhaps lost a bit of control on the game in the second half. But I mean, really, Pearses kind of almost shot themselves in the foot, because they were 7 points up at half time. They were still 7 points up going into injury time. So really they were the better side, and it really was indiscipline could have cost them dearly, because once they were down to 10 men, Boyle cut the gap back to had the gap cut back to 2 points by the time the final whistle blew.
310 to 114, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
And here we are. So Padraig Pearses, like in the last couple of years, like they've got to a final, been relegated, and they're back up again into a final.
Yeah, I mean, relegation. For instance, St. Foyle's got relegated this year, and they would have been a fairly strong team as well. So it can just, I suppose, the sort of thing that can happen. A team just gets off to a bad start, has a couple of injuries, but they were never an intermediate team, and they came straight back up again. Like Pearses have been in.
It looks like 5 finals.
5 finals since 2005, I think.
Yeah.
2005, 2008.
2012, 15 and 16.
Yeah, and in their best, generally they ended up playing either Clonagale or Bridget's, and so generally they were going in as underdogs. So this is probably the first final where you kind of look at Pearses and say they've certainly got a 50-50 chance at least, whereas when they were playing Bridget's, they were always underdogs. They played Castlereagh in I think 2008, took them to a replay, so they're a bit like the Mayo of.
They love hearing that.
Yeah, in that.
Not a Roscommon person like it's been compared to than the failures of their rival county.
That's true. So they're trying to get the monkey off the back. They're I think 7 times beaten finalists and never won overall since I think 1962 was the club was founded. So yeah, they've been in 7 finals, and it's now like Mayo. It's kind of like a millstone around their neck. So they'll be really
a millstone and a monkey hanging off them,
and a monkey.
Yeah, one around the neck and one on the back.
Yeah.
What about Roscommon Gaels though? Because just looking at the finals in recent times, they won one in 2004. After that, I don't see them in a final. Actually, they were in a final in 2017, lost to Bridget's. Haven't been there otherwise. So they beat Strokestown 113 to 10 points in the semi-final, which sounds convincing enough.
Yeah. Roscommon Gaels, they've had an easier path to the final than Pearses. They topped their group, winning 3 games out of 3. They beat Elphin comfortably enough in the quarter-final and Strokestown comfortably enough in the semi-final. Like, even the final score, it actually looks closer than I think it was, because at one stage I think they led by 8 or 9 points, or maybe 9 or 10 points to 1 up. Roscommon Gaels have been a common team for a while. Like, Roscommon Gaels are one of the big powers in Roscommon, so it's 15 years without a senior title. I think that's the longest they've ever gone without a senior title. So
Maybe a monkey on their back at this stage.
well, not a monkey on their back, but it's not quite a millstone around their neck.
No.
It's definitely a monkey.
But like, if you were to look at the county quality, there's probably far more county stars on the Pearses side than there is on the on the Roscommon Gaels side.
Yeah. Well, for Pearses would have had 5 inter-county players lined out against Boyle. So you'd have the three Daly brothers, Niall Connor and Ronan, David Murray, who played cornerback for Roscommon this year, Hubert Darcy, who would have played at wing forward for Roscommon this year. In addition to that, you'd also have Niall Carty, who is a former Roscommon captain. So he'd be still. He played full back for Roscommon earlier in the decade, so he'd still be around the Roscommon panel, I'm sure, only for recurrent injuries really caused him to take a step back from inter-county football. So in terms of Roscommon Gaels, they only had one county panellist with the Roscommon team this year, and that was John McManus. But I think that stat is a bit misleading, because they also have Cian Connolly, who was corner forward in the 2017 team.
Speedy lad.
Yeah, you might remember he scored...
Was it a goal against Galway?
An excellent goal against Galway. Jimmer Murta played a cross-field pass and he kind of dummied the full-back and slotted in the corner. So he'd still be, if he wasn't a starter on the Roscommon team this year, he'd certainly be on the panel, only that he's now based in Dubai. So that's so he's definitely will be a player of county standard. Apart from him, you'd have David O'Gara, who won a Connacht medal with Roscommon under Fergal O'Donnell in 2010. Connacht winners medal, was on the All-Ireland minor team that won
in 06.
In 06.
That you won't shut up about.
Yes, exactly.
That you're still going on about.
And we will continue to work about it as well. So he'd be around. He'd be the same age as the likes of Conor Devaney, another member.
Yeah.
Fintan Craig, another member of that 2006 team. So he would be of that vintage, and he'd be a very experienced player and a very important player for Roscommon Gaels. Apart from him, other players that would have played county football for Roscommon over the last few years from the Gaels side would have been Scott Oates, Mark Healy, Cathal Deneen, Mark Nelly. And
Mark Nelly was with Longford.
Mark Nelly played with Longford last year.
Featured in the league a bit, I think.
I think so, yeah. So he was he switched briefly, I think maybe for 2 seasons. So he would have been always a Gaels player up through since the early part of the decade. Would have played on under 21 teams for Roscommon that reached All-Ireland final in 2012.
Losing to Jim Gavin's Dublin team, I believe.
Jim Gavin's Dublin team in 2012, 2014 we lost as well. I can't remember, that wasn't Jim Gavin's team though. But so that's so Mark Nelly will be, he's actually not getting his place on the Roscommon Gaels team at the moment, so that tells you how the sort of strength and depth they have.
Despite not being littered with county players.
Yeah, exactly. So they've also got a couple of up and coming young players, Peter Gilhooly and Richard Hughes. So they'll be playing in and around the full forward line, probably. Certainly, Gilhooly will be. Hughes will be further back. So it's a bit misleading to say that Roscommon Gaels had only one county panellist this year. I mean, Scott Oates, for instance, is based in Dubai as well. He'd probably be in and around the panel if he was based in Ireland. So realistically, you could be looking at 3 or 4 panelists if they were all available.
So overall, is it a fairly evenly matched game?
Well, you're certainly looking at 2 evenly matched teams, and it's a very difficult game to call. I know back home in Roscommon, a lot of people are going for Roscommon Gaels because I suppose they think that maybe Roscommon Gaels are maybe they have a more kind of well balanced team. They seem like they've no discernible weaknesses. They also have plenty of firepower. I suppose one thing in Pearses, both sides will place a high premium on defensive solidity, so it'll probably be a cagey affair. One thing Pearses will have in their favour is that they've been racking up plenty of goals, so they've scored 7 in their last 2 games, and I think they've scored 11 overall in the championship so far. I think Gaels have maybe about 7 so far, so Gaels are averaging maybe just over 1 goal a game, Pearses just probably over 2. So in a tight game, goals could prove crucial. So maybe Pearses, that'll be one thing in their favour. They also have Niall Daly. He's an All-Star nominee. He's been awesome for both club and county this year. So he's going to be a key player in the game this weekend. I suppose the one concern you might have for Roscommon Gaels is that they haven't been given a real serious test in the championship so far.
They might know where they're at themselves.
Yeah, so they haven't faced any of the big guns like St. Bridget's, Clonagale, Western Gaels or Boyle. Pearses, on the other hand, were drawn alongside Clonagale, Western Gaels and Boyle at the group section of what was the group of death, considered the group of death in Roscommon. So Pearses ended up topping that group. They beat Boyle and Western Gaels, and they did lose to Clon, but it was in a dead rubber. They'd already secured top spot at that stage. So in the quarter final, then they beat Bridget's. In the semi final, they beat Boyle again. So Pearses are definitely, you could say, they're definitely well battle hardened ahead of the final. Whereas you couldn't say the same about Roscommon Gaels, who won all 5 of their games by a margin of between 4 and 8 points. So while that will give them plenty of confidence, the fact that they haven't been overly stretched could leave them a small bit undercooked.
For someone now who hasn't seen too much of the Roscommon club stuff, only what's on telly really, like Padraig Pearses, they've lost a lot of finals in recent times. Getting 3 red cards in the semi-final, albeit none of those lads are suspended because they were all on 2 cards. Like, is any of that play a part coming into this final? Kind of the bridesmaid effect, the indiscipline. Yeah,
I'd say they're definitely a couple of variables that could play a big part in the final, in what transpires this weekend. So, like, if Roscommon Gaels are coming in maybe a bit undercooked, certainly you could say Pearses, there'll be big expectations, and that'll bring a pressure all by itself. And I think there were definitely signs of this in the semi-final against Boyle, as we talked about already. Really, there were shocking levels of indiscipline. I mean, as I said, picking up 8 yellow cards, I think, in the first half, 1 red card and another 2 in the second half. So it's hard to see them getting away with that sort of indiscipline for 2 games in a row. So while I tentatively back Pearses to win this Sunday, it's on the assumption that they keep their heads. They certainly play with a lot of aggression, but it needs to be controlled aggression, and they need to have all their players on the pitch for the majority of the game. That can help. That could be a huge advantage. And I mean, to be fair, they were able to cope with it against Boyle, but I don't think they're going to cope. Yeah, you wouldn't think of doing it every day. No. That's I don't think they're going to get away with it this weekend. So to manage that, I definitely think there's a decent chance of them breaking their duck and bringing home a county title for the first time this weekend. But so as you can see, that's why you can make a case for either side, really. But what about the matchups? What stands out most? The matchups I'd be certainly interested in looking at in particular would be, for a start, you'd have David Murray versus Cian Connolly. So David Murray was Roscommon's first choice cornerback this year, and I think generally, from seeing him at both club and county, he's probably turned into one of the best man markers in the country at this stage. Few people were suggesting he was unlucky not to get an All-Star nomination along with Daly and Conor Cox. So his performances for Roscommon, particularly against Mayo and Galway, were excellent this year. But as we talked about already, he's a player that likes to play on the edge. So he's the first player to see red against in the semi-final against Boyle. So he'll be assigned to mark Roscommon Gaels' most dangerous scoring threat, which would probably be Cian Connolly. He's their free taker. He's a beautiful striker of the ball. So if he gets any room on Murray at all, he'll be going for the posts. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top of that head to head. Like I say, if
good ball goes in, Cian Connolly's going to do damage on most lads.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, again, if Murray starts resorting to maybe going over the line a bit and starts picking up yellow cards or a black card, then you're
and as well, a ref is more inclined to give it out if the treatment has been dished out to someone who's a bit smaller and slight.
Yeah,
so you could see that.
And I suppose their cards have been marked, so to speak,
Yeah.
based on that semi-final as well. So maybe a referee might be kind of looking out for them a bit more now.
And you're thinking Scott Oates and Ronan Daly?
I'm thinking Scott Oates versus Ronan Daly. So Oates is a very strong ball carrier. So Pearses will probably earmark one of the Dalys to keep tabs on him. So as most people who have
to sew it into him,
this
basically.
year, all the Dalys are pretty feisty and enjoy a physical battle, and Ronan is no exception. So I assume I'm taking it that Ronan could be the one that picks him up. So nominally Oates tends to play at wing forward, but he tends to drop deep and kind of pick up ball from deep and sort of drive forward. So so he'll be a hard player to stop. So that should be very physical battles. So that should be an interesting one. So it should make for interesting viewing as well. I suppose the other one I've picked out is Hubert Darcy versus John McManus. Darcy, again, some people would have seen him play wing forward for Roscommon this year, but he plays at full forward for Pearses. He's a very strong and mobile target man. He'll be up against one of the top defenders in the county in John McManus, who's a good ball playing defender. He likes to he'd be strong. He'd be very physically strong. He likes to join the attack when he gets a chance.
They know each other well from county training?
From county training and from playing. Pearses and Gaels have faced each other a good bit over recent years. I think they've met in a couple of semi-finals. I know Pearses bet Gaels in one semi-final, and Pearses, I think, got the better of Gaels last year. So they know each other well. So whoever gets the better of that matchup, I think will have a large bearing on the winning and losing of this weekend's game.
And in a word, who's going to win it?
Like I say, I think I've got a slight fancy for Pearses, assuming they keep all the players on the pitch.
Right, that's the Roscommon final this weekend, and don't forget you can follow Martin on Twitter at Martin Wynne, WYN.